G'day viewers and welcome to another ONO. As previously discussed, the best thing to do is to subscribe, as you'll see up the top. Notification bells, thumbs up, what else? Share it. Guys, we've got to grow this channel so we become a force on YouTube. Right, today I've been asked by a couple of subscribers, not only on this channel, but on the previous channel, Phil and Jen in the Philippines, on my views and comments about the current situation with things like the Ukraine and China and this type of thing. Now, I'm just going to pose some questions. It may be interesting for a lot of the American viewers to hear the perspective of someone that's not American, one, living outside the country and observing from afar. Now, we all know Australia's been a constant ally of the United States for God knows how long. So it's not as though I am picking on the United States, it's just my observations and my conclusions that I draw. And sometimes it's interesting for you people to get someone else's thoughts. Now, considering the US, whether you like it or not, over there has such an impact on the rest of the world, I think I am in a position to be able to comment because you have a massive influence on my country. And it's not anti the US, it's not a pro the US, it's just observations. First, we'll start with what I consider, and I'm not saying it's right, it's just my consideration and my perception, and perception sometimes is everything. We'll take the China-Taiwan situation. We talked about being students of history in a previous film or a video vlog, and anyone that knows the history of China, the occupation of Formosa or Taiwan, as it's now known, will know the basic history of that particular country or relationship between Formosa or Taiwan and China. And it goes back to the 18th century and whatever. But in a nutshell, it was always considered at one stage of the game, excuse me, to be part of the Chinese Empire. Until the Portuguese came along and occupied it, and then after the Portuguese, the Japanese grabbed it, and then etc., and went on. Now, I'm not using that as an excuse for any action that takes place, but the reality from my perspective and other people's perspective here is China's made a statement that they're going to take Taiwan. And I don't really think the rest of the world can do anything about it that is of benefit to them. And I think the reason it's taking up so much airspace is the effect it will have on a lot of rich businesses who have planted themselves and depend on Taiwan as a manufacturer and whatever, as far as that country is concerned. I also believe that the furphy of going to the defense of democratic countries is just that, a furphy. It's a blind for a lot of businesses to basically whip up fervour amongst the general population to give it credibility to do whatever it expects us to do. The problem is big business and the people with money aren't there firing bullets and whatever. But having said that, geographically, I don't think it's possible for the United States to even defend Taiwan. We're talking about 124 miles or 124 kilometres, or virtually pissing distance from China to Taiwan. And when the Chinese make their move, and I say when because at no time do I ever think that there's going to be a diplomatic solution for this, it will happen within a 24-hour period. There might be some resistance and some bloody resistance from Taiwan, but by the time the Americans, let's face it, they can't have the fleets floating around the South China Sea forever. The cost is just immense. So they're going to be somewhere in the world where they're going to have to steam towards Taiwan. And to what outcome? The Chinese will have already occupied. Now, does the Americans, or do the Americans wish to get in a protracted war with another superpower? I don't think they do. And if it's not the American government due to obligations, it's the American people. You know, Australia and the United States have just pulled out of an absolute fiasco in Afghanistan. the Americans have left over $1 trillion worth of weapons and equipment there. And now the military are asking to replace all that stuff. And again, we the mug, or not we, but you the mug, taxpayers, are paying for it. But anyway, I think that's an inevitable situation. I don't think the Americans or anyone can do too much about it. And they're going through the saber rattling simply to save face. China will take Taiwan, and then hopefully diplomatically we can work something out. And remember, diplomacy is only another way to save face. We can work something out so it doesn't escalate. I don't think it will escalate because it'll be all over Red Rover before anyone can blink. That's my thoughts on it, right or wrong. I'm not suggesting that I am right. That's just my perception on that particular part of the world. Then we go over to the Ukraine. Now, isn't it convenient? We have a limited war in the Ukraine that everyone, NATO is sitting back and America is sitting back, or the governments of America and NATO being the military arm of Europe, are sitting back and supplying weapons, guns, bullets, God knows what, to the Ukraine. Now, these are all expendable type items, and the only one that's really going to benefit from this, yes, I'm not going, before we go on and people say, the freedom of the people of Ukraine, but let's go back in history again. It was only a very short period ago, when we're talking historically, that Ukraine was part of the USSR. They may not want to join, but Russia, there may be some historical value in what Russia say. There may be some historical value in what the Ukrainians say, but the fact of the matter is, at one stage, the Ukraine was part of the USSR. That's no excuse for Russia to barge in. But, governments have a tendency to create chaos and then come up with a solution that benefits nobody apart from big business. The Americans' appropriation committees that were supplying funds to the armed forces were very slow after the fiasco in Afghanistan to keep supplying money to the US military machine to resupply and restock. The attitude of most people or most politicians, ourselves included, was that, enough's enough. We've got the biggest military in the world in the United States, I'm talking about. I perceive that it was a very difficult sell to get more and more money pumped into the military war machine. Now all of a sudden this limited action's come along, and they're pumping weapons and armament and whatever in, disposing of these goods. So again, big business can resupply. Now, that might be fanciful, but that's the way I perceive it, and a lot of people do. Out of all these actions, the only people that benefit are corporate entities involved in producing things like weapons, other corporate entities with other disasters that have been occurring in the world, such as COVID. The only people or organisations to benefit are business, pharmaceutical companies, etc., etc., etc. If behind anything that goes wrong on this planet you look hard enough, the benefits always flow in one direction. And we go back in history. Business does not stop because a war's on. And the Coca-Cola Company, if anyone knows any of the history of the Coca-Cola Company, was still trading in Nazi Germany, under the guise of creating Fanta. They were still trading. Schindler, of Schindler's List, a historical figure. The only time he ever made any money was during the war. He had numerous businesses, both before and after, all failed. Wars create business, apart from devastation. Look at the Second World War. Japan was devastated. Germany was devastated. And with our taxpayers, and I say ours because Australia contributed as well, the Allies' taxpayers, they rebuilt the countries. And now the countries are the two biggest economies, or some of the two biggest economies on the planet. From nothing in a space of 60, 70 years, they are now leading the world, and they've done it on the backs of taxpayers in the United States, Australia, and allied countries. Instead of the the currency flowing the other way and slowly developing the country. And the reason they developed those countries is because businesses could benefit from the rebuilding and ongoing situation of these rebuilt countries. In the meantime, the cash cows like ourselves that keep forking out, the Americans that keep forking out for ridiculous actions that they really have no interest in. Let's look at the Middle East. Why were we, and we were as well, allies of the United States, why was the United States in the Middle East? Everyone knows it was for the oil. Again, big business. Halliburton financed these actions. Big business. With the blood, sweat and tears of people like you and I and our kids that paid the price. For what end? The Saudis became richer and now they're turning their back on the United States. The only reason the Saudi royal family is in the position it is because the United States promoted the Saudi family. That's an historical fact. And now they are allowing it to happen. And the thing they dangle in front of us, both in this country, in Europe and the United States, is patriotism. And all we get is a tin badge if we go into these war zones, or a flag to our parents if we get killed. Because they certainly don't take care of the vets when they come home. Look at it this way, and you might be able to educate me, and I'm only too happy to be educated. But you have a certain group of countries which are now nuclear powers, and the arsenals are big enough to destroy the globe. Let's take the United States or Russia or whatever. What in God's name do we really need? If we have that type of firepower available to us, why do we even need such huge conventional armies? Because whether it be limited warfare or whether it be nuclear warfare, the end result is always the same. Deaths. It doesn't matter how you go, how you get put in the ground, but military is big business. And it's always at the expense of the citizen that is paying for it, because they hold up the fear thing. This will happen and that'll happen and this will happen. If we don't do this and if we don't do that and if we don't do God knows what. If China takes Taiwan, do you think they're going to march down like the bullshit they in the Second World War and the Germans did and the Japanese did? No, the Chinese will buy the world in the end, as long as we keep giving them the opportunity to do so by allowing them all the manufacturing. They will literally not have to go to war. They'll just buy the rest of the world out. Russia, Putin can't last forever. One thing about history is, tyrants of all descriptions eventually die. Okay, if he crosses the border, it becomes a direct threat. Okay, drop the bomb. If you've got them, you've got to be willing to use them. I'm not advocating using them, of course. But this is a farce, and we keep paying for it. Anyway, some thoughts on that. I believe encapsulated in the thing that, as I said, China will take Taiwan. America and the rest of the world have absolutely no way of preventing that, and we can jump up and down and saber rattle all we want. It's going to occur. And I just think the Ukraine war is very, very convenient as far as even the way it's structured and the way we keep pouring stuff into it. I believe that possibly we'll come to a diplomatic solution, but Russia will have achieved what they want to achieve. Putin can save face. He'll retain the Crimea and the sections that he's probably got control of at the moment. The other thing I forgot to mention is you've got to realise too, in the Ukraine, a lot of them speak Russian. There is a lot of sympathy towards Russia. There are a lot of Ukrainians that have family in Russia. It's just a shit fight from go to woe.